3 years ago, I married into the top-tier Taylor conglomerate, taking on the duty of bringing luck to the Taylor family's eldest daughter who had been in a coma, and I began living the easy life of living in a mansion, driving luxury cars, and using the supplementary credit cards. Until one day, the wife who had slept for a full 3 years suddenly opened her eyes. My wife was cold toward me, and it was obvious she loved someone else. So I went to my mother-in-law with a divorce agreement, only for her to pick up her limited edition platinum handbag and say, "Come on, Ethan, your mom will live with you." I tucked the printed divorce agreement into my pocket and found my mother-in-law, who was sampling red wine. "Mom, I want to divorce Sophia." The hand holding the wine glass paused. "Have you thought it through?" I nodded emphatically. "I've thought it through." "Don't worry, Mom. I'll still come see you often and give you back rubs and shoulder massages." After all, in the 3 years at the Taylor household, my mother-in-law, Victoria Bennett, one of the group's directors, had truly treated me like half a son, much better than my calculating biological mother, Martha Johnson. Unexpectedly, my mother-in-law set down her wine glass and picked up the internal phone, instructing her assistant Luna. Immediately, right away, get my private jet ready and pack my usual things. Yes, I need it now. I was dumbfounded. "Mom, what are you doing?" My mother-in-law smiled, still elegant as ever. "I'm tired of staying in this place too. I'm leaving with you to start a different life." I was completely stunned, but what about George, father-in-law? My mother-in-law waved her hand, calm and indifferent. "Oh, and tell him I want a divorce from him too." "Me, wah?" In my past life, I was a finance worker crushed by overtime. After staring at the trading screens through nonstop nights for a week, I suddenly died of overwork in front of the trading desk. When I opened my eyes again, I had somehow transmigrated into a parallel world, becoming a recently graduated, utterly broke corporate drone named Ethan Johnson. At that time, the original owner, tempted by the sky-high betrothal gift, actually a buyout fee, agreed to marry into the Taylor family to bring luck to their daughter Sophia Taylor, who had become a vegetable. As a result, he was mocked by his ex-girlfriend and buddies for being a kept man, got depressed, binged on alcohol, suffered alcohol poisoning, and died. After I absorbed the memories, I looked at Thomas, the Taylor family's butler who had come to remind me to fulfill the agreement, and at this settling-in fee in my bank account. More zeros in US dollars than I'd ever seen in my life, and immediately nodded. "I'll marry. Ah, damn. I'll be a live-in son-in-law. I can sign the contract right away." The original owner's parents, Arthur Johnson and Martha Johnson, were holding the huge sum of dollars, tears of excitement in their eyes. "Ethan, go to the Taylors and live well. Just don't ever think about us." Sigh. Actually, I understand. In this era that laughs at poverty, but not at prostitution, this opportunity is literally a pie falling from the sky for people at the bottom. A wealthy family inviting a son-in-law, who are ordinary commoners like us, to refuse. The original owner's pitiful pride is nothing at all in the face of real money. I thought it through carefully. Although Sophia is a vegetable, if I go there I'd simply be a living widow. But the Taylors were wealthier than a country. Marrying in would be an instant win for me. No need to compete, no need to curry favor with bosses. Financial freedom right away. That's right. The mindset of a corporate drone is that pragmatic. So, a month later, I was married into the Taylors' mid-mountain estate. On the wedding day, everything was kept simple. My mother-in-law, Victoria Bennett, practically shoved a car key and an unlimited supplementary card into my hand. "Ethan, sorry for the trouble. From now on, make yourself comfortable at home. Spend as you like, use people as you need. As for the one lying in the room, just treat him as an expensive mascot. Put him on display and leave it at that." My mother-in-law, Victoria Bennett, is the Bennett Group's heiress and now one of the core directors of the Taylor Consortium. She keeps herself in excellent shape and looks like a woman in her early 30s, but there is always a trace of loneliness in her brows. Hearing that, I was simply flattered. If I didn't know Sophia was my mother-in-law's own daughter, I would have thought the mother and daughter had some deep, bitter grudge. Seeing my confusion, My mother-in-law sighed lightly. Sophia had an accident 3 years ago and ended up like this. The specialists have consulted so many times, and all say the chances are slim. The so-called reviving marriage is nothing more than seeking psychological comfort. At the time, I was dazzled by the manor's luxury and my mother-in-law's beauty, and could only nod blankly. All right, mother. I'll do as you say. For the next 3 years, I live the life of a pampered son-in-law like a deity, sleeping in until I wake up naturally every day. In the afternoons, I'm either having tea with my mother-in-law or learning to taste wine, admire watches, and collect artworks with her. Occasionally, my band of freeloading friends try to come mooch off us, but the security guards stop them at the foot of the hill, so they can't even get through the gate. Out of boredom, I taught my mother-in-law how to play esports and took her into ranked matches. She has an extraordinary talent for it, jumping from novice straight to high-level games. Sometimes when I hold her back and cause her to lose points, she secretly compensates me by swapping me for an even flashier supercar. Every night when I go back to the bedroom, I have to mutter 2 lines to the wife sleeping on the bed. Miss Taylor, thanks to you, this freeloading life is really sweet. Just sleep soundly, don't be shy. Never in a million years did I expect that on the very anniversary of my 3rd year as a live-in son-in-law, she woke up. That day, I was out fishing on a private yacht with my mother-in-law, wearing sunglasses and enjoying the blue sea and sunshine with a 1982 Lafite and freshly air-freighted caviar at hand. Young madam is awake. The young madam has opened her eyes. Personal assistant Luna ran over holding a satellite phone, her voice trembling. My hand shook and half the Lafite in my cup spilled. Damn it, my fairy tale live-in son-in-law life is over. In a fluster, I was about to get up and change clothes to head back, but my mother-in-law gently held me down. She leisurely took off her sunglasses, revealing an attractive face. What's the rush? If she wakes, she wakes. Are we holding up our fishing? I was close to tears. Mom, that's your own daughter waking up. My mother-in-law suddenly realized and nodded. Oh right, almost forgot. By the time my mother-in-law and I flew back to the estate on the private jet, Sophia was already propped up on the top-tier medical bed. She was extremely beautiful, with a cold, stunning air. 5 parts of her delicate features resembled my mother-in-law, while the other 5 inherited the hardness and authority of my father-in-law, George Taylor. Those eyes, just opened, swept over me icily. I instinctively swallowed, forcing a smile. Whiff, wife, you're awake? My mother-in-law followed behind me, her tone fairly flat. It's good that you're awake. I sneaked a glance at Sophia, mentally ranting. Is this really a biological mother? Sophia said nothing. Her gaze first landed on me, then shifted to my mother-in-law. In an instant, both my mother-in-law and I straightened up a bit without meaning to, and the atmosphere grew somewhat tense. That look was exactly the same as when her father-in-law, George Taylor, scolded his subordinates. Utterly oppressive. After a long moment, she spoke. Her voice was hoarse from disuse, but still cold. Mom, who is he? Her mother-in-law didn't even raise an eyelid. Oh, the groom I found to bring you luck, Ethan. See, aren't you awake now? Ethan brings you good fortune. Sophia gave a faint with no emotion detectable. Then her gaze slowly swept across this bedroom, which was comparable to a presidential suite. Only then did I belatedly realize that I had already turned this room into my happy nest. A model of a starship I scavenged hung on the wall. My top-tier esports gear sat in the corner. My limited edition jerseys were tossed on the sofa, and even the air was filled with the cedar scent I usually used. Seeing her slightly furrowed brow and increasingly cold eyes, I quickly said, I'll tidy up right away and restore it immediately. Sophia said nothing. She simply closed her eyes and began, at a rapid pace, to have her assistant brief her on the corporate matters she had missed over the past 3 years. Seeing that, I sensibly stepped back and left. As soon as we were out the door, my mother-in-law and I both exhaled in relief, our shoulders sagging. I edged closer to her and murmured, Mom, you seem kind of scared of Sophia? My mother-in-law rolled her eyes at me irritably. Who's scared? It's just the way she looks at people. It's cut from the same mold as your father. It gives me the creeps. When I thought of my father-in-law George Taylor's stern, intimidating face, I immediately understood. My mother-in-law Victoria Bennett came from an elite aristocratic family. In her youth, she was a celebrated beauty and talent, the #1 socialite of her time, with suitors lined up from Paris to New York. But precisely because of that, her family, seeking a powerful alliance, married her off to George Taylor, who came from an equally prominent family. It was said that my mother-in-law once had a devoted artist boyfriend. After being forced to break up, he left for distant lands and was never heard from again. And my father-in-law, George Taylor, also seemed to have an unattainable white moonlight in his heart. They had a commercial marriage for 20 years. In the vast Taylor empire, Sophia was the only heir. In the 3 years I stayed at the Taylors, I saw my father-in-law only a handful of times. When the two of them interacted, they were courteous and distant, more like business partners than spouses. I was pondering this when my mother-in-law patted my shoulder. Why overthink it? Come on, I just bought a blue diamond at auction. Let me show you what setting would look good on it. My eyes lit up, and I instantly tossed the waking Sophia out of my mind, scampering after her. Mom, you're the best. Sophia waking up was a major bombshell for the entire Taylor conglomerate and the global financial markets. My mother-in-law ordered the kitchen to prepare an extremely lavish family feast, and even specially notified my father-in-law, who was handling urgent matters in North America. That night, my father-in-law indeed hurried back, travel-worn. But following him was a woman in an Armani haute couture suit, a sharp and capable businesswoman, Claire Lewis. The butler Thomas had mentioned that Miss Lewis was the father's special assistant, his longtime comrade, and rumored confidant. I heard she had never married. Claire behaved with grace. After handing a document to my father-in-law, she smiled at my mother-in-law. Director Bennett, Sophia waking up is truly wonderful news. I noticed with a keen eye that when Claire appeared, my mother-in-law's fingers tightened slightly around her wine glass. But she still smiled flawlessly. Miss Lewis, you worry too much. When taking her seat, Claire naturally sat between my father-in-law and mother-in-law, and in conversation spoke as if she knew the group's affairs and my father-in-law's preferences intimately. Mr. Taylor, this truffle was just air-shipped in. Try it. Director Bennett, this is the new vintage from the winery you like. Have a taste? I watched silently. Miss Lewis carried herself like the lady of the house, yet maintained a subtle, almost scrutinizing attention toward my mother-in-law. She wasn't like those low-level, faux innocent women. Her level was very high. It was said that when Sophia had the accident 3 years ago, she was the one who dealt with all the aftermath decisively and steadied the group stock price. I had seen her a few times before. She always used reporting work as an excuse to go home with my father-in-law, and each time she would incidentally show concern for my mother-in-law, implying in everything she said that I understand Mr. Taylor better. Once I was in the garden and vaguely heard her say to my mother-in-law, George and I have worked together for so many years and weathered countless storms. Our rapport is something others can't match. Director Bennett, you enjoy a life of leisure at home. What a blessing. And every time they talked, my father-in-law would happen to appear, seemingly interrupting unintentionally, as if afraid my mother-in-law would embarrass Claire. Just like now, when the atmosphere between my mother-in-law and Claire grew awkward, my father-in-law naturally steered the conversation to the North American market acquisition deal. Claire's attention was immediately captured, and she and Sophia began discussing business strategy. Watching my mother-in-law quietly eat, I suddenly understood where that hint of loneliness in her expression came from. In this vast business empire, she, the legitimate wife, always seemed to be a glamorous yet out-of-place outsider. Even her daughter, whom she raised with her own hands, had thought patterns and behaviors more like her father-in-law and that Miss Lewis. Mom, try this. I picked up a piece of braised sea cucumber with scallions for my mother-in-law. Kitchen Uncle Lee's specialty, cooked to perfection. My mother-in-law's eyes curved into a smile, and that distance between us lessened a bit. Ethan is thoughtful, after all. So as not to make my mother-in-law feel neglected, I pulled out all the stops, chatting about a newly discovered private restaurant to the latest supercar models, swapping auction house gossip for which club had the finest cigars, and somehow got through that rather delicate family dinner. After the meal, my mother-in-law and I curled up in the home theater to watch the game. I casually slumped into the massage chair and handed her a can of cold beer. "Mom, look, that pass was terrible. I might as well get in there." She took the beer, drank a swig in a down-to-earth way, and laughed while scolding, "Just keep boasting. Actually, I own shares in this team. I'm one of the behind-the-scenes small bosses." At first, relying on the financial instinct from my past life and the Taylor family's resources in this one, I secretly made some investments, putting money into industries that looked outlandish but would blow up later. Esports clubs, metaverse real estate, new types of batteries. It turned out to be hugely profitable, but it drew criticism from some old-school shareholders who thought I wasn't doing my duty, were ashamed of the Taylor family, and even wanted to audit my accounts. If my mother-in-law hadn't backed me, I probably would have really crashed. It was only then that I realized my mother-in-law had been secretly keeping an eye on all my investments and had quietly helped me clear quite a few obstacles. My mother-in-law was captivated by the brilliant goal and couldn't help cheering. Like a young girl, her profile under the lights was bright and charming. This match is really thrilling, far more interesting than those boring dinners. I looked at her and suddenly somewhat understood why my father-in-law hadn't appreciated her. My mother-in-law laughed and patted my head. "Silly boy, what are you looking at?" After a while, I caught sight from the corner of my eye of my father-in-law standing at the cinema entrance. When he'd gotten there, I didn't know, and he was watching my mother-in-law, who was cheering with us, with a somewhat complicated look. When she saw him, the smile on my mother-in-law's face faded a bit. She stood up and walked over, turning back to say to me, "Ethan, get some rest early." Back in the master bedroom, I suddenly remembered that Sophia had woken up. By rights, as the live-in son-in-law, I'm supposed to fulfill my duty and share a room with her. My heart was pounding. I hurriedly called the personal assistant Jack. Quick, move my game consoles, figurines, and jerseys back to my original guest room." I had been staying in a master bedroom to allow the top medical team to monitor Sophia's condition at any time, needing my human mascot presence. Now that the real lead has woken up, I, the fake, should naturally know when to skedaddle. The assistant had just moved my VR gear out when Sophia emerged from the shower. She wore a silk robe, less domineering than during the day, but showing off a slender figure and a frosty elegance. Seeing the assistant carrying things, she frowned slightly. "What are you doing?" I forced myself to explain. "Miss Taylor, you just woke up and need complete rest. I don't sleep well and might be noisy, so it's better to move it back." Sophia's gaze fell on my face, expressionless. "It's too late. We'll talk tomorrow." When the room was down to just the two of us, the atmosphere froze instantly. Sophia sat on the sofa, handling emails on a tablet, the screen's light reflecting off her cool, pale face. I curled up on the edge of the bed, pretending to scroll through news on my phone, but my peripheral vision kept sneaking glances at her. I used to laugh like a pig when I scrolled past funny videos. Today I couldn't even laugh when I scrolled past tense international developments. Later I switched to reading financial reports. After only a few lines, my eyelids started to fight. "Take a break." Sophia had somehow put down the tablet. Her voice sounded unusually clear in the silent night. I felt as if I'd been pardoned, yet still climbed back into bed on edge and lay stiff all night. The next day, I got up with dark circles under my eyes, yawning nonstop. When I went to my mother-in-law's for breakfast, she saw right through my guilt at a glance. "Look at you. Good for nothing. Scared of her? You don't have to keep her company anymore. Sleep on your own from now on." I nodded, and as I sipped my coffee, I happened to notice a faint red mark beneath the collar of my mother-in-law's nightgown. I suddenly lowered my head, pretending to concentrate on dealing with the fried egg, while inwardly ranting. "Holy shit. Father-in-law is quite the player, huh?" Sophia's awakening was like a nuclear-level boon for the Taylor Group. Her physical condition was excellent, and with a top medical team, she was able to handle high-intensity work normally in less than half a month, doing rehabilitation training without fail every day. That day, renowned physician Mr. Benjamin Carter, who came to conduct a comprehensive assessment, couldn't help but praise. Miss Taylor's recovery is astonishingly fast and truly rare. The basic care over the past 3 years was done extremely well. Her chi, blood, and meridians have been very well maintained. My mother-in-law stood to the side and naturally looked at me. This is all Ethan's doing. For 3 years, he's followed the experts to learn massage, watched the nutritionist plan meals, and even said we should get more sun to absorb yang energy. My face flushed. Standing there, I felt a little embarrassed. In fact, every time I finished serious care, my mother-in-law would give me a little treat, either a new project to practice on or introductions to some contacts. My skills improved purely because the material rewards were generous. Sophia, upon hearing this, looked up at me and said in a flat tone, "Thank you for your hard work." It felt like a boss telling a subordinate, "Well done." In the following days, my premonition came true. On the surface, Sophia was polite and courteous, but in reality, she threw herself wholeheartedly into reclaiming control of the conglomerate, so busy every day she was never seen. After I moved back to the guest room, the two of them met only a handful of times. Aside from the occasional run-in at my mother-in-law's, there was almost no communication. I thought to myself, fine, it seems she really looks down on me as a live-in son-in-law. Then I won't make a fool of myself anymore. I had planned to keep living off the Taylors, clinging to my mother-in-law and safely playing the part of a wealthy idler. That was until one day, at a top business summit where the Taylors were the main host. At the banquet, elites gathered and drinks flowed. I stayed beside my mother-in-law as a background prop, but from the corner of my eye I caught sight, not far away, of a new Silicon Valley tycoon, the hotshot Wall Street Chinese-American genius investor, Silas Foster. His gaze was almost glued to Sophia. In an instant, I immediately became eager for gossip. During the summit break, people gathered in small groups to chat. I was accompanying my mother-in-law on the terrace for some fresh air when I vaguely heard the idle chatter of several big shots nearby. If Miss Taylor hadn't accidentally fallen into a coma back then, the marriage between the Taylors and the Fosters would probably have already happened. Who would have imagined? Teaske. I heard Mr. Foster was utterly devoted to Miss Taylor. Waited 3 years. A strong alliance between the two is the inevitable trend. My heart gave a sudden jolt. I understood completely. No wonder at the banquet, just now someone had been hinting and asking my mother-in-law, what plans do the newlyweds have? My mother-in-law reacted quickly and laughed it off. The children's matter should be handled by themselves. We, the old ones, won't worry about it. So that's it. This Silas Foster is probably Sophia's official boyfriend or a determined suitor from before she fell into a coma, right? Since they're a perfect match in looks and background, it's better for me, the stumbling block in their path, to quietly move aside. As I was thinking that, my mother-in-law said coolly, "The Taylor's family matters need not trouble any of you. Ethan is my Taylor family's proper son-in-law." Those big shots gave awkward smiles and dispersed. My nose felt a bit sour. Forget it. No matter what relationship Sophia and Silas have, this freeloading life has come to an end. Not long after the summit, Sophia officially announced her return to take over the Taylor Group. That day, both she and my father-in-law were at the company headquarters, and the manor was unusually quiet. I went back to the guest room, opened my laptop, and typed the 4 words divorce agreement. In 3 years, the resources my mother-in-law provided and the dollars I quietly earned through my own investments were already enough to give me financial freedom for several lifetimes. I no longer cared to be known as the Taylor family's live-in son-in-law. The only thing I couldn't bear to part with was my mother-in-law. I pocketed the freshly signed divorce agreement and went to see her, just beginning to explain my intentions. My mother-in-law, without a word, immediately told her trusted assistant to begin moving some core assets and to arrange the itinerary. "Mom, I'm leaving because this act can't go on. Why are you making a fuss?" I anxiously tried to shut her laptop. My mother-in-law looked up and smiled, radiant. "Ethan, life is short. Seize the pleasure. I woke up a bit late, but you're not too late." But what about my father-in-law, the group's stock price? I was worried it would blow up and be impossible to contain. My mother-in-law laughed freely. "The Taylor Group has deep roots, and Sophia has returned. The sky won't fall. It's time I lived for myself once." Her assistant's eyes were slightly red as she murmured, "Director Bennett, you should have done this long ago." That afternoon, we signed 2 copies of the divorce agreement, packed several big suitcases and countless black cards, boarded a private jet, and left the Taylor estate in style. My mother-in-law took me straight to a private island she owned, Emerald Island. I had never been to this island before. The facilities were luxurious, the scenery beautiful. More refreshing than the Taylor's estate. "This place is amazing." I walked on the fine white sand, looking at the azure sea, feeling like I had arrived in paradise. My mother-in-law, wearing a sun hat, lay on a beach chair with a slightly dazed expression. This is a property I bought myself. It wasn't registered under the Taylors. While I was in a bad mood before, I would come and stay for a few days. I don't want to think about the past." I handed her a glass of chilled juice, smiling without a care. "From today on, the 2 of us will be a happy, single rich duo." My mother-in-law laughed at my teasing and took a sip of juice. "Yes, just like you said before, women. Oh no, people must each have their own territory. From now on, this place will be our base." Settling in kept us busy until late. My mother-in-law had people prepare a seafood feast and fine wine, and we drank together on the beach under the stars. After a few cups, my mother-in-law opened up. "I was foolish back then too. Thinking family-arranged marriages were the natural order, I married on a dare, thinking at worst we'd live separate lives. It was only later I realized that a canary trapped in a cage, no matter how splendid the cage, is not happy. I also tried to fit into his world, but in the end we were not the same kind of people. These 20 years looked glamorous, but inside they were already empty. I listened silently, feeling rather uneasy. Just as I was about to say something comforting, the assistant came over holding a satellite phone and said softly, "Director Bennett, Mr. Taylor, and the young Mrs. Call came through to me." My mother-in-law paused, set down her wine glass, and said calmly, "It's done. Everything that needed to be said is clearly written in the agreement." For several days, my mother-in-law blocked all contact from the Taylor family and settled into island life on Emerald Isle as its owner. But I could tell she wasn't as carefree as she seemed. After a moment's thought, I leaned in, "Mom, since you're free anyway, want to do something? Like invest in a movie? Based on you." My mother-in-law's eyes lit up. She was intrigued. "Sounds interesting. Tell me more." So I based it on my mother-in-law and devised a project called Island Queen. It tells the story of a wealthy socialite leaving an unhappy marriage, starting a new life on an island. Building a career, enjoying life, surrounded by various cute young men and wolves. Though I didn't dare state that explicitly, living freely and recklessly. As soon as the project was set up, even before it officially launched, it caused a small stir within the industry. Several streaming platforms scrambled to secure exclusive collaboration rights. But just as I had finalized a partner and was ready to make a big move, producer Ryan Moore called with a mournful face. "Ethan, the project might have to be put on hold for now." After asking further, I learned that the Taylor Group had intervened and exerted pressure. "Since the movie can't be shot for the time being, we'll just go experience life first." My mother-in-law and I immediately booked out a nearby top resort famous for its male model restaurant, Coral Bay Resort. This resort has unique rules. All the servers are handsome young men with good figures, offering genuine companion play and companion chat, legitimate. Services. No sooner had she sat in the VIP area than a sunny, handsome surfing instructor named Noah walked over. "Sis, bro, want to try something exciting?" His smile was dazzling, his eight-pack abs flashing. My mother-in-law raised an eyebrow, clearly pleased, much more interesting than staring at those old foxes. I nodded along, and the other brooding, artsy-looking handsome guy Leo beside me had already started mixing drinks and even improvised a quick sketch for us. The performance at the center of the stage was choreographed with strong tropical flair and full of energy. My mother-in-law and I watched while sipping the special cocktails, and before we knew it, we'd had too much to drink. Seeing me a little dizzy, she teased me, "With your drinking, you still need to practice." I chuckled sheepishly, leaning back on the comfortable sofa. "Mom, this wine, it's pretty strong." The handsome artist Leo beside me thoughtfully handed over a hangover-curing tropical fruit tea, leaning forward slightly. Just then, a commotion came from the resort entrance. Two familiar figures strode over with gloomy expressions, flanked by a group of bodyguards. My father-in-law, George Taylor, and my nominal wife, Sophia Taylor. George spotted my mother and me sprawled on the sofa with a handsome guy beside us at a glance, his face turning ashen. "Victoria Bennett. Ethan Johnson. What are you doing here?" Sophia followed behind him, her gaze landing on my slightly tipsy face and the artist, Leo, beside me, brow furrowed, radiating a chill. The guitarist was so startled he missed a note. The other guests fell quiet and looked over here. Most of my drunkenness had worn off. I straightened up instinctively. But my mother-in-law remained calm and collected, even taking a sip of wine. "George Taylor, what's it to you? As you can see, I'm enjoying my life." A vein twitched at George's temple as he forced down his anger. "Victoria, stop this. Come back with me." Just as he was about to step forward, the bodyguard his mother-in-law had brought and the resort security immediately stepped up, forming a standoff. George glanced over and sneered. "You think these people can stop me?" His mother-in-law finally looked at him properly, her tone calm but resolute. "George Taylor, we've been married for 20 years. A business marriage. I married unwillingly, and you married reluctantly. Now that Sophia can handle things on her own and the Taylor Group's position is secure, I don't want, and I won't, go back to being that ornament of a Mrs. Taylor." George's Adam's apple bobbed. He seemed to want to say something, but his mother-in-law didn't give him the chance and continued. "If your heart has always been filled with your grand ambitions and your intimate assistant, then why bother interfering in my life?" No sooner had she finished speaking than a rare trace of panic flashed in George's eyes. The other guests had already been politely escorted out by the manager. My mother-in-law stood up and grabbed my hand. "Let's go." I hurried to follow. Passing by Sophia, I saw the complicated look in her eyes and silently prayed. "Hurry up and sign, sis. Please let me go." Sophia suddenly spoke. Her voice was still cold, but carried a faint, hard-to-detect frustration. "If Mom wants to leave, let her." "Ethan, you are my husband in the eyes of the law. You must stay." I timidly raised my hand. Miss Taylor, actually I was the one who suggested the divorce, and I asked Mom to come out for some fresh air." Father-in-law George's sharp gaze immediately focused on me, and I felt like I'd be drowned the next second. Mother-in-law pulled me back and said calmly, "Sophia, you can't force a melon to be sweet. If you truly have feelings for Mr. Silas, just sign the papers willingly. Don't be like your father, delaying others and torturing yourself." George suddenly spoke, his tone more urgent than ever, even a little pleading. "Victoria, it's not what you think. Claire and I." My mother-in-law waved her hand, cutting him off, a trace of weariness on her face. "George Taylor, I've heard those explanations for 20 years. I'm tired. Now I just want to live for myself." After saying that, she stopped looking at them and walked straight out. I hurried to follow her, glancing back to see George frozen in place, while Sophia's look at me was so complex I couldn't decipher it. The resort incident soon spread through high society, spawning all kinds of versions. Some said Victoria Bennett had finally had enough and abandoned the life of a disgruntled rich wife. Others said I, the indebted son-in-law, had the gall to abduct my mother-in-law and run away from home. It even affected Taylor Group's brief stock fluctuation. But when the news reached the Bennett family, the equally domineering eldest brother from their maternal side, Daniel Bennett, just snorted, "As long as my sister is happy. That wooden George Taylor has long been unworthy of her." Meanwhile, the Coral Bay Resort we had leased became famous because of it, inexplicably attracting many wealthy society women to come and experience it, and business was booming. That day, father-in-law George Taylor actually chased over to Emerald Island by helicopter, and besides the cold-faced Sophia Taylor, there was also Claire Lewis's assistant with him. It seemed more like Claire and her father-in-law had started arguing on the helipad. "George Taylor, you and Victoria are already divorced. On what grounds do you still get to interfere with where I go?" Claire's voice carried a suppressed fury. George frowned tightly. "Claire Lewis, for the sake of the contributions you've made to the company, I've tolerated your schemes, but don't take it too far." The two of them couldn't reach an agreement, their voices growing louder and louder. Her mother-in-law had a headache from the commotion and reluctantly told the security guard to let them in. In the island's glass living room, the atmosphere was extremely oppressive. George stood in the middle, his face dark. "Claire, say it clearly today in front of your Bennett director." But Claire suddenly smiled, a smile laced with a few hints of mockery and relief. "Say clearly what?" "Say clearly why I risked my life all these years working myself to death for your Taylor Group." "George Taylor, do you really think I did it for you?" She suddenly turned to her mother-in-law, the usually sharp and capable career woman. Her gaze became incredibly complicated, full of guilt and struggle, and finally transformed into a strange frankness. "Victoria, I'm sorry. I've stayed by his side all these years not because I love him." She took a deep breath, as if making a huge resolve. "It's because I love you. Ever since many years ago, the first time I saw you at the Bennett house, The wine glass in a mother-in-law's hand clattered onto the carpet, her eyes widening, completely speechless. "You. What did you say?" "But you always said you two were perfectly in sync." Sophia stood to the side, rubbing her brow, her tone carrying a trace of weariness and helplessness. "Mom, I vaguely knew something about this. Aunt Claire, she just chose the wrong way. Dad has always been kept in the dark, only thinking Aunt Claire was an efficient right hand." Now everything was clear. Father-in-law George froze in place. The stern face that he always wore showed a crack for the first time. He looked at Claire, then at his wife, as if his whole worldview had been overturned. Mother-in-law clutched her chest, unable to digest the enormous amount of information. After a long moment, she pointed at George, then at Claire, and finally managed to blurt out, You are outrageous. Get out. All of you get out." The mother-in-law pointed to the door, her voice trembling with anger, her graceful demeanor completely gone. Claire looked at her, painful yet determined eyes. "Victoria, I know you can't accept this right now, but every word I said is true. I'll wait until the day you're willing to face me." After saying that, she actually took George, who hadn't reacted yet, by the hand and started to leave. Before mother-in-law could catch her breath, Sophia still stood rooted to the spot without moving. "You're leaving too." Mother-in-law closed her eyes, not wanting to look at her. Sophia stepped forward, her tone more serious than ever, even a little wronged. "Mom, you're getting divorced. I'm an adult now, but I can choose who I'm closer to, can't I?" I almost choked on my saliva. This isn't a line from my project, Island Queen, is it? How does she know it? My mother-in-law also snapped her eyes open and glared at her daughter. "Sophia, when did you learn to be so cheeky?" Sophia's tone remained earnest, and she shot me a glance. "These past years, it was Dad and I who were wrong. We neglected your feelings. I don't want to repeat that mistake. I can handle the company's matters remotely. I want to stay here with you and him." The last 3 words were almost inaudible. My mother-in-law looked at her, but in the end couldn't bring herself to be cruel. She waved her hand tiredly and turned toward the terrace facing the sea. "Do as you like." I wanted to follow my mother-in-law to comfort her, but my wrist was gently grasped by Sophia. Ethan, she called me by my full name, her voice not as cold as usual, but instead a bit awkward. What happened with Silas Foster was a misunderstanding. He did pursue me, but I never agreed. That's Summit. He acted on his own, and I pushed him away. I raised an eyebrow, signaling her to continue. I, Sophia Taylor, am not someone who changes her mind easily. She paused, her ears seeming a little red, but she forced a calm tone. And legally, you're still my husband. These 3 years, you rubbed my whole body, referring to massages. You have to take responsibility. I almost burst out laughing, but held it back. Miss Taylor, I was doing rehabilitation for you. I don't care. She suddenly became a bit domineering, lifting her head, those cold eyes staring straight at me, her gaze firm. I didn't sign the divorce papers, so you're still mine. I looked at this suddenly somewhat childish CO, finding it both funny and a little novel, and teased her on purpose. Take responsibility? For what? I don't want the job of son-in-law for the Taylor family. Sophia panicked and blurted out. Then I'll marry into your family. Anyway, Mom likes you better. After saying it, she seemed to realize her slip, and her face instantly flushed. I was stunned. Mom, are you okay? I quietly walked onto the terrace. My mother-in-law was staring absent-mindedly at the horizon. She turned, her face wearing a dazed expression as if awakening from a dream. I've lived half my life and feel like a joke, like I just had a big dream. Thinking back on that earth-shattering bombshell from a moment ago, it still feels utterly surreal. I sat down beside her. Mom, don't dwell on that. But speaking of which, Sophia said, the Foster family seems to want to deeply cooperate with us and the Taylors on that new energy project in the Southland region. My mother-in-law, upon hearing this, almost reflexively said, George will handle it. Her tone even carried a habitual trust. Perhaps after 20 years of marriage, even without love, there are bonds and tacit understandings outsiders can't comprehend. I couldn't help asking again, so? Miss Lewis, what about her? My mother-in-law gave a bitter smile and rubbed her temples. Let her calm down on her own. Right now, I don't have the heart to deal with any of that. After several days of being tormented by my father-in-law, Sophia, and the remotely harassing Miss Claire, who left us both irritated, my mother-in-law and I simply turned off all our communication devices, took a luxury yacht out to sea, and went completely off the grid to enjoy the peace. Blue sea and sky, with only the sound of seagulls. My mother-in-law and I wore casual outfits, fishing, diving, sunbathing on the deck. Life was blissful like immortals. We nearly forgot all our troubles. That day, we had just returned from a diving spot and were about to open a bottle of champagne to celebrate, when we found the yacht's engine seemed to have a minor problem and had temporarily died, drifting on the sea. I was about to check it when another, even more luxurious and massive yacht slowly approached. Two familiar figures stood on its deck, dressed in casual vacation attire. My father-in-law, George Taylor, and his daughter, Sophia Taylor. George spoke first, looking a bit awkward, oddly holding a toolbox in his hand. Victoria, I see your boat seems to have stopped. Need any help? He paused and added, I passed the yacht maintenance license. Before mother-in-law could answer, Sophia stepped forward, holding a fruit plate, glancing at me, and awkwardly said, Mom, Ethan, want some fruit? Get some vitamins. My mother-in-law and I stood on the deck, watching the suddenly changed demeanor of the father and daughter, looking at each other in bewilderment. My mother-in-law couldn't help it and let out a snort of laughter. Great, it seems I have to completely overturn and rewrite my script for the Island Queen. Extra, George Taylor. 20 years ago, when the Bennett family proposed a marriage alliance, I had just seized the largest competitor with an iron hand. At the celebration banquet, guests crowded in and flattery never ceased. But amid the clinking glasses and mingled revelry, I only saw her, wearing a Valentino red dress, sitting alone in the corner quietly, sipping her wine. At that time, she had just returned from studying abroad. Though clearly the center of attention at the party, she carried an aloofness as if detached from everything. When she saw me looking at her, she lifted an eyebrow and raised her glass, a hint of mockery at the corner of her mouth. Faced with that bright yet barbed woman, I actually forgot the business lines I had prepared and instead awkwardly raised my glass in return. Later I heard from my assistant, Miss Bennett doesn't want to marry. Things are really tense at home, and that she had a deeply devoted boyfriend whom her family forcibly separated her from. On our wedding night, the bridal chamber was decorated with incomparable luxury. She turned her back to me and said calmly, "George Taylor, we're just a business alliance. There's no need to pretend. Let's not interfere with each other." I said fine, turned and went to the study, tried to read the merger case all night, but not a single word got in. At that time, I thought wealthy marriages were probably like this. She was the darling of the Bennett family. I was the helmsman of the Taylor family, and peaceful coexistence was best. But at some point I didn't notice when my gaze would always follow her. The flowers she arranged, I find an excuse that the study needed a touch of decoration and move a pot there. A business case she casually commented on, I would ponder over it repeatedly. A gentle smile she occasionally showed to her subordinates would inexplicably make me agitated. Shortly after the wedding, she became pregnant with Sophia. When her morning sickness was severe, I used the pretext of an investment to buy the private convalescent home best suited for prenatal and postnatal care. On the day she gave birth, I stood outside the delivery room all night, signed multiple critical condition notices, my hands trembling so much I couldn't sign my name. Later, I secretly had a tubal ligation, not wanting her to suffer childbirth again. Claire often hinted to me, "Mr. Taylor, some feelings, if you don't say them, others will never know." But I'm used to controlling everything, and the one thing I don't know how to handle is expressing emotions. Words get to my lips and always turn into "this project's profit margin is pretty good," or "the stock price went up again." It wasn't until she left the divorce papers and took Ethan away that I suddenly realized my so-called protection and arrangements had pushed her farther and farther from me. Victoria looked at me, surprise and distance in her eyes, and a faint smile. "Mr. Taylor can fix a yacht." I took a step forward, my gaze calm but resolute. "If I don't know how, I can learn. As long as you need me."